Before a camera rolls, before a line is spoken, before a single frame is edited, someone has to imagine it. This video isn't about drawing storyboards. It's about learning how to think like someone who visualizes. We'll walk through a finished commercial, not to analyze it, but to reverse engineer the thinking that might have shaped its visualization. Because visualization is more than just sketching. In a way, you are rehearsing the possibilities. It's where you get to map motion and meaning. It's how we begin to turn story into screen. Visualization is not a checklist. It is a forecast of how your story will be told, what we'll see, how it will move, and what it will make us feel. It encodes framing, emotion, movement, and timing, all before a single shot is taken or recorded. Instead of building a storyboard from scratch, we are instead creating a shot list, a breakdown of what was actually shot, edited, and delivered. We will trace the thinking behind each frame. And in doing so, we'll learn how to think like a storyteller, someone who sees the story before it's made. To understand a shot, we'll ask 3 questions. First is, where are we? That's about space, the environment, the context, and the visual cues. Next is, what's happening? That's about action, what the subject is doing, deciding, or reacting to. Last is, what's being felt? That's about emotion, what's expressed through framing, pacing, or performance. Not every shot will answer all 3. Some will focus on location, some will highlight action, while some will reveal emotion. And that's okay. They're questions to guide your thinking, to help you read each frame with intention. They help us anchor our annotations in what the shot is doing, visually, narratively, and emotionally. Visualization isn't just about framing, it's also about motion. Every shot moves, and every movement carries meaning. We imagine 3 kinds of motion. First, subject movement. What the character does. A glance, gesture, a pause. These choices shape emotion, intention, and rhythm.
Sa bayan.
Here, the main character is described as making her way past the crowd.
Ng bansa, kundi ang
Second, camera movement. How the lens, the camera, and the mount responds. It could be static, panning, tilting, tracking, and so on. Each movement reshapes perspective, space, and focus. As shown, the movement in this shot is described as slowly tilting up. Third, movement in the edit. How shots are cut, repeated, timed, and how they transition to the next. Editing creates rhythm, emphasis, and emotional pacing.
sa taas ng iyong mga marka, bilang
In the last 3 shots of this sequence, the subject's moving gaze cuts to the camera's panning movement and fades through a white frame onto the next sequence of shots. I think it's time to watch this entire student production in full.
Sa anong numero mo gusto makilala? Sa taas ng iyong mga marka, bilang ng taon sa pag-aaral, bilang ng obra o istrukturang nilikha. Ang pagiging iskolar ng bayan ay hindi nasusukat sa araw at oras na inilagi sa pangunahing universidad ng bansa, kundi ang karangalang magmahal at maglingkod sa bayan.
Tay! Umasa ako, Tay.
Ito ang tatak, UP.
Visualization doesn't just plan images and movement, it also plans narrative arcs. Even the simplest story has a structure. You've felt that hinted at the previous example. We've heard it many times. Every story has a beginning, middle, and end. The most common example of the narrative arc is the three-act structure, composed of the setup, where you are introduced to the world, the characters, and the interruption to their status quo. Next is the confrontation, where they embark on a journey and overcome obstacles to their goal. Last is the resolution, where they finally resolve their problems and their world is never the same again. Let's watch this 3-minute video entitled Touch Me Not to better see the narrative arc in action.
Huwag kang mag-alala, Magda. Next week ako na uli. Ayan no. Good luck ha. Nga pala, ingat ka kay Sir Bill. Siya yung anak ni Miss Tucker. Tahimik, pero pilo yun.
Miss Tucker! This is Magda po! Miriam's friend. Si Mrs. Tucker!
It's too early. It's probably her son, Bill. Are you alright?
No! Don't touch me!
Nga pala, did you meet the gardener?
Touch Me Not is only 3 minutes long, but it tells a complete story. In the first act, or the setup, Magda is asked to fill in for Miriam to clean Mrs. Stacker's house. In the second act, or the confrontation, Magda succeeds in doing the chores for Miriam, but fails in avoiding Mrs. Stacker's mischievous son, Bill. In the final act, or the resolution, the real Bill comes home, and Magda realizes she slept with the gardener. 3 beats, each one could be visualized not just as a drawing, but a moment of choice. So as we move forward, we won't just ask what the shot shows. We'll ask where it sits in the story. Now that we've framed the logic, motion, meaning, mapping, we're ready to begin. We'll play each shot from a commercial and annotate it using the same categories a storyboard artist might use. More importantly, we'll ask, what does this shot express? What does it anticipate? And what does it teach us about visual storytelling? Let's begin.
Si Dad.
Oh, Kevin, bakit hindi mo pa ina-accept ang friend request ko?
Break barriers for new beginnings.
Instead of drawing a storyboard for a short film that we haven't produced, instead we will build a shot list from this commercial that you just watched. But it's more than just a technical breakdown. It's a mirror that reflects the choices a storyboard might have imagined before the shoot ever began. We'll annotate each shot using 4 columns. First, the shot description. This includes the technical details, running time, the scene heading, the shot description through the size, angle, movement, blocking, directing, the audio elements, the graphics or visual effects, and the transition to the next shot. Second, the scene action. This is where we describe what's happening in the shot. To help us articulate this, we use 4 prompts. Is it an event? Something that happens to the subject? Is it an action? Something that the subject actively does? Is it a decision? A motivated choice or action, or a turning point? Or is it information? A detail revealed that advances the story. These aren't answers, they're lenses. They help us clarify the narrative function of the shot. Third, the story intention. This is where we step into the storyteller's shoes. What do we want the audience to know, feel, realize, or interpret? These are directorial choices. Even if they're never written down, they shape how the shot is framed and paced. And fourth, the message or theme. This connects the shot to a larger story. What values, ideas, or emotional truths are being pursued? Even if the theme doesn't always seem explicit, it should echo here. These last two columns, story intention and theme, may not necessarily appear in a formal shot list or storyboard, but they're essential. Because as storytellers, we must think beyond the technical. We must understand the emotional and narrative intention behind every frame, even if it's never written down. So let's begin. Let's start by describing the shot. In terms of motion, subject movement, minimal, they're seated and relaxed. The camera movement, static. The edit movement, it's a clean cut to the next shot. The audio is light, easy mood music. Technically, I would call this a medium full shot. It's wide enough to show the environment, but tight enough to establish relationship. But isn't that a full shot? Or isn't it a long shot? Remember, shot labels vary. Different people, different references would probably describe the shots in a different way. It's important for you and your crew to have the same vocabulary, definitely. But this team for this production may have used a different way or a different word to describe the shot. As long as you have an understanding, that's okay. But what really matters is the narrative function. What's the first thing this shot tells us? Not just about the story, but about how it wants to be seen. Let's answer that by describing the scene action. Two prominent figures are seated casually around a table. The background gives us chairs, tables, umbrellas, plants, and some people. All the clues we need to know that we are outdoors. The coffee cups and relaxed posture of the two prominent figures suggest a cafe setting. We can therefore confidently say that this is anchored on location. Why? Because it orients us spatially before anything emotional or narrative unfolds. In our annotation table, we can further reflect on it and identify that the scene action is more of an event. Something happens to the subject through the implied notification from the phone. The story intention here is thought. We want the viewer to know where they are, and a subtle narrative trigger is given through the alert on the phone. The message or theme doesn't seem to be explicit yet, so let's leave it for now. If you were storyboarding this, you wouldn't just draw two people at the table. You'd try to include elements of the background to signal the location. You'd annotate the mood, the framing, the ambient clues, because this is how you guide the viewer's first impression.
Si Dad.
What shifts in the shot, visually and emotionally? We're still in the cafe, but the framing tightens. Kevin looks at his phone and smiles. He says, "Si Dad." We might write all that in our annotation table under scene action. We realize that we are being anchored on action. Kevin actively reacting to the alert. Technically, I would call this a medium close-up, but a profile one. It's a bit tighter than your usual medium shots that are characteristic of actions, but it makes sense. The action is small after all. But more importantly, it shows his friend, and it's close enough to register both their expressions, even if the friend is out of focus. The story intention is thought. Perhaps we're sparking curiosity from the audience. Even the trigger is very subtle. The information sparse. What's the most direct piece of information here? And why does it matter? Let's describe it first. Technically, this is an extreme close-up. So, is this anchored on emotion? The shot is certainly tight, which usually reveals an emotion. But we're not really feeling anything, are we? It's hardly locating the subject. And we already know that we are in a cafe from the previous shot. Maybe it's action? The friend request happened, but wasn't that already covered by the previous shot? Nothing new is really happening in the shot. Here we realize that it's not always black and white. Sometimes a shot is simply revealing information. We learn something that advances the story. Or another way to think of it is, a shot's relevance is not just on its own, but on the shot's preceding or succeeding it. This enriches the previous shot that was anchored on action by providing information. Who is his dad? So we might write that in the scene action. A friend request from his father, Manuel Silverio, is seen on Kevin's phone. Now we scrutinize. What is the message or theme? It's a simple close-up providing information. Can there really be a theme or message there aside from the information itself? Again, let's skip it for now. Instead, let's see how the next shot relates to all of this. What happens when someone doesn't act? Scene action. Concern flashes across Kevin's face, then he puts the phone down. No, not just down, face down. Technically, this is a close-up. Tight enough to register subtle emotion, but not too tight to exclude the phone he's looking at. What is it anchored on? We see the expression. We know he feels something. So yes, it's emotion. But is that all? In the descriptors for our scene actions, this falls under decision, a motivated pause, a moment of internal conflict. So can it still be an action when he didn't accept the friend request? This is how we distinguish a decision from a simple action. A decision is motivated, something that has narrative weight. Another important thing here is that the action is not something that is done, but something that is withheld. The decision to not accept. The hesitation is the action. The story intention here is thought. We want the viewer to notice the hesitation and begin asking why. We can't really feel anything yet, can we? We simply don't know enough. Now let's pause and reflect on what we've learned from the first 4 shots. Shot 2 reminds us that a shot can simply deliver information. Kevin smiles and says, "Si Dad." It's a reaction, but it's also a reveal. We now know who sent the friend request. But meaning deepens when we look at shots in sequence. This is what we call motion in edit. The juxtaposition of shots, what comes before and after, and how they relate to each other to create meaning. We've also seen that shots can carry more than one anchor. Shot 1 was anchored on location, 2 men at a cafe. But it also carried action, as Kevin receives a notification. Shot 4 showed hesitation. Kevin doesn't accept the request. He puts the phone down, face down. That's not just emotion, that's a decision. So the shot is anchored in both emotion and action. In shot 2, we learned something subtle but important. An anchor is not exclusively expressed through its traditional shot sizes. Shot 2 highlighted action through a medium close-up because the action itself was small. We already know the story. We know that this tight shot also expresses intimacy between friends, which contrasts with the emotional distance from his father. So the shot is less characterized by size, but its narrative expression. We also learned that scene action is always charged with story intention. A decision is likely to be emotional, even if subtle. An action can be symbolic. They always contribute something to the story. The message or theme column may seem blank at first, but as the story unfolds and we reflect back, the themes begin to emerge. Shot 1, companionship interrupted by that friend request. Shot 2, recognition. Shot 3, a father is introduced, but only 2 mutual friends? And why only now? Shot 4, hesitation, withholding, the tension of reconnection. Collectively, we finally realize that these 4 shots in this first scene is a setup for the entire story, where it firmly establishes the themes: family, the tension of digital connection. Individually, these shots may seem small and short, but they were never meant to stand alone. Each one contributes to the larger emotional and narrative arc. And that's the mindset when visualizing your story through a storyboard. You don't just draw what's seen, you anticipate and articulate what you want to mean. Let's continue to the next scene. We are now indoors at a family lunch. The Silverios are gathered, chatting. Technically, this is a group shot, framed as a medium full shot in relation to the subjects in it. Wide enough to show multiple subjects, tight enough to register dynamics. This is a location anchor. It establishes space, time, and relational context. But it's also emotionally charged. This scene action can be categorized as action. No decision is being manifested. And it's not just information. It's not just an event of a gathering. The characters, Kevin included, are happily engaged in the lunch. So what would you write under scene action? You'd probably write interior, another day. The Silverio family is enjoying a lunch together. The story intention is emotion. We want the viewer to feel the warmth of the family, to set up the nuance of the dynamic with the father.
Oh, Kevin,
Kevin is laughing with the family. The mood is light. Then, off screen, his father calls out, "Oh, Kevin." This is an emotion anchor, but it's also a narrative pivot. The tone shifts. The moment narrows. Technically, this is a medium close-up. Close enough to register Kevin's expression, but still within the group context. Cramped to feel the closeness with the family, but also cramped to get hints of the other family members' reactions. In our annotation table, this falls under scene action. Event. Something happens to Kevin. He's being addressed. And the moment is no longer ambient, it's personal. The story intention is emotion. We want the viewer to feel the warmth of belonging to this family.
bakit hindi mo pa ina-accept ang friend request ko?
What happens when the unspoken becomes spoken? Manuel looks at Kevin and asks, "Bakit di mo pa ina-accept ang friend request ko?" This is an action anchor. The scene is a confrontation. Manuel is eliciting a response. Technically, this is a medium close-up. The story intention is emotion. We want the viewer to feel the discomfort, the emotional weight of the question, and the vulnerability it exposes. What does a smile mean, especially when it replaces a reply? Kevin doesn't answer his father's question. He just smiles. No words, no confirmation. This is an emotion anchor, but it's also a decision. He chooses not to engage. The smile is a shield. Technically, this is a medium close-up, tight enough to register subtle emotion. It also matches the medium close-up of Manuel. In our annotation table, this falls under scene action. Decision, a motivated non-response. The silence is the action. So we write, Kevin only smiles back. The story intention is emotion. We want the viewer to feel the ambiguity. What is Kevin feeling? Warmth, deflection, discomfort? Why didn't he accept the friend request? Now that setup from earlier is becoming more relevant. Manuel sits quietly, looking at Kevin. He's waiting. This is an emotion anchor, expressed through stillness. It's also information. We know now that Manuel expected something more. Technically, this is a medium close-up, the same medium close-up, in fact, a continuation of Manuel's previous shot. In our annotation table, this falls under scene action, action, even in stillness. It sounds ironic, but Manuel is actively waiting. The story intention is thought. Why is he putting his own son on the spot? Technically, again, a medium close-up. It is clearly intercutting the two shots of the father and the son. How would you describe the scene action? Now we realize why the first shot of this scene is not just an event, but action. Kevin is actively enjoying the lunch. It's not an event that he is passively in, because it sets up this discomfort. It's emotional contrast. Kevin still does not respond. He looks around to his, presumably, siblings. His body says what he doesn't. Awkward. We see the scene action fully aligning with the story intention. Both are anchored in emotion. This shot communicates Kevin's internal conflict, the weight of the moment, the inability to respond. In a way, the visible discomfort is the movement. And the theme becomes sharper. Manuel's expectation versus Kevin's hesitation. The father taking an emotional risk and the son being paralyzed by emotion. The contrast between the quiet reaching out and the burden of unresolved history. It's another day. How do we know this? Not from this shot, actually. It's the next shot that clues us in, not the first shot of the scene. But narratively, as storytellers, we pace it deliberately. The delaying of that information may have been a decision that happened only in post-production. We see Kevin's phone again. The scene action can be characterized as information, but it's also action by inaction. The interface hasn't changed, and that's the point. The friend request from Manuel is still there, unaccepted. Shot description, an extreme close-up. The framing may be static, but the meaning is active. Story intention, we want the audience to think, what's happening? What's the issue between Kevin and his father? Shot description, technically this is a medium shot, wide enough to show posture and space, close enough to feel the mood. Scene action, simply put, Kevin is alone now. He stares at his phone. The request is still there, a detail we know because it was preempted by the previous shot. We might even add some directorial choices here. The background is dark, in shadows. The lighting isolates him. What is it anchored on? Again, action through inaction. But it's also anchored in emotion, expressed through his fidgets, the way he looks away. The story intention is thought. We want the viewer to begin wondering what they're starting to feel. Kevin seems to be having an internal debate about something. Full shot, interior. Not in an office, a condo. That may have been hinted by the previous medium close-up shot, but we can be sure now. That shows that this shot is anchoring us in location. Why is this important? It shows that he doesn't live with his family, that he has a life of his own. The space also gives us an opportunity to externalize his emotions. The look and feel created by the dark background from the previous shot carries into this condo. What does hesitation look like? When the decision is right there but still not made. The look, the action, the blocking, the audience is no longer just wondering. The intention is to make them sure something is bothering him. He looks back at his phone and he scrolls. Extreme close-up. Kevin goes through his Facebook feed. Photos of him and Anton. They're close. In a relationship, it appears. This is simply information, not new to Kevin, but new to the audience. But it's also anchored in emotion for both the character and us, the viewer. This is what the storyteller has been building up to. In one quick shot, the audience suddenly feels what Kevin has been feeling, what he's been hiding. When those two things align, information and emotion, it's usually a realization, either for the audience or for the character. Now that we know the full context, the subtle tension in his shoulders, his expression, suddenly feels much heavier. The shadows in his room suddenly feel like they're closing in on him. This is anchored in emotion. But then the commercial does something interesting. It cuts to another extreme close-up, the fourth close-up of a phone, and not the last. It is an advertisement after all. Kevin types the words, "Dad, inaccept na kita." He hesitates just slightly, then presses send. We never see him actually press accept on that friend request. We never see his face at the moment he did it. For all that build-up toward this moment, we are never rewarded the image of him making that decision. This is an example of ellipsis. Let's describe the shot. It opens with the empty living room. The phone on the console table receives the message Kevin just sent, as implied from the preceding shot. Manuel walks into the frame, a medium full shot. He picks up the phone and opens the message. The shot itself begins as a full shot of the living room because the space is the subject. Once Manuel enters, he becomes the subject, and we redefine the shot size based on his presence in the frame. Are these decisions random or decorative? Might as well add some movement by making Manuel walk in. We haven't done a big subject movement like this in any of the preceding shots and scenes anyway. Maybe it's time, right? The shot is static, but the subject's entry provides movement, yes. But the movement isn't just with the subject. The frame itself evolves. From being anchored in location, it shifts to action, and finally, to emotion. How? It opens in the living room to give us time to notice the elements of production design in the foreground. Photos of Manuel and his wife, with him in military uniform. Beside them, his medals, presumably from years of service. He walks in not just to give us a moment to appreciate those narrative elements, but to build anticipation for what's about to happen. We assume or expect that Manuel will be seeing the photos of his son and his boyfriend for the first time. Not only because he's been locked out of Kevin's personal life, as we deduce from the previous scene, but now it's layered with new information. This might have happened in a span of a few seconds, but that's enough to build anticipation in us as audiences. Being a military father, we now reasonably assume this is a major reason Kevin has been reluctant to accept his father's friend request. His reluctance to let him in. We wonder, how would he react when he finds out his own son is gay? Everything about the scene is deliberate. Nothing is random. The shot size, the blocking, the movement, the art direction, and even the shots juxtaposed before and after. You might think there's no motion in that static camera framing, but motion manifests in the subject and in the edit movement. And with all the meaning generated by all of that, we, as audiences, become even more invested in the story. A close-up of Manuel, the phone framed in. No music, no dialogue, no sound other than the atmospheric hum of the room. The message has landed. We know what's in it even before Manuel reads it. The silence is no longer empty, it's full. We are completely gripped by anticipation. The build-up from earlier isn't just extended, it's intensified as the close-up magnifies Manuel's unreadable expression. Everything is anchored in emotion. The shot size, the scene action, the intention of the storytellers. A similar medium full shot of Kevin still seated on the same couch in his living room. We see more of Kevin's personal space. The change in perspective, from his seated profile to this full frontal view, adds a different layer to his isolation and nervousness. It feels so empty, with him by himself, visibly shaken by nerves as he waits. A close-up. Kevin's hand holds the phone, one hand rubbing the other, communicating his emotions in lieu of his face. It's anchored in emotion, yes. Is there a new action or a decision? No. We're simply informed that he remains as he was moments earlier, a continuation of his emotional state, maybe an intensification. It's certainly not static. The extension is deliberate, making us feel the stakes that Kevin is already carrying. A medium close-up. Kevin receives the message. A phone alert breaks the silence. He looks at his phone. Across 5 shots, we've been waiting for this event, the arrival of Manuel's reply. There hasn't been anything left for Kevin to do but endure the weight of his father's reaction. An extreme close-up. Manuel's reply on Kevin's phone. Unlike the other shots, we read this at the same time Kevin does. Anak ako din. The scene action is information, yes. But it's also a moment of action on multiple levels. This isn't just a reply. It's Manuel reaching out after, we assume, seeing Kevin's photos with Anton. It's a deliberate act of acceptance, a gesture of love. There's no face to communicate emotion, but this is the emotional climax of the entire narrative. It's anchored in emotion, and the story pivots to its resolution right here. We return to the same medium close-up. Kevin reacts, concurrently with us, after reading his father's message. He lets out a small smile. He leans back. No tears, just unburdened. But our emotions soar, just as Kevin's do. The resolution, as it often is anchored in emotion. This is the final beat of the arc.
Break barriers for new beginnings.
We close this narrative with a medium full shot. Kevin sits, quietly changed. Heartwarming music plays. A voiceover enters. Break barriers for new beginnings. The SMART logo fades in, along with the slogan, Welcome Change. The arc has resolved. The story exhales. Earlier, we identified many themes: acceptance, expectations, emotional distance. A storyboard doesn't usually require you to include the creative columns, the ones that refer to intention and message and theme. But as storytellers, we are aware of them. In selling the product, the advertisement presents as a theme: break barriers for new beginnings. It may not echo every nuance we discussed, but all those earlier themes are tied to this final declaration. They're not valid because they're stated. They're valid because they're earned through the integrity of the story and the cohesion of the production. The dialogues, the acting, the shot selection, the production design, the lighting, the music, the direction, every element working in harmony to tell the same narrative. This is what it means to base your technical choices in the story, to anchor your shots in the narrative. But before we move on, let's step back and look at what this storyboard actually gave us. The final edit runs for 1 minute and contains 24 distinct cuts, meaning 24 shots appear in the sequence. This refers to the number of shots in the timeline, not the number of unique setups or takes. Some scenes intercut between the same footage, so the actual number of filmed shots is fewer. 18 shots were taken. There were 4 scenes in the entire advertisement. Some unfold in just 2 shots, simple, direct, focused. Others stretch across 7 shots, focusing on glances, gestures, moods, reveals, and even silences. They are layered, emotional, very precise. So when we visualize a scene, we don't just ask what happens. We ask how many moments need to be seen, and how each shot helps shape them. Shot count isn't about quantity, it's about rhythm, intention, and what the scene needs to feel complete. Across 4 scenes, I counted 9 setups. Every shot begins with a setup. It refers to the specific configuration of the camera and the lighting for a shot, including its placement, angle, shot size, movement, and the rigging required to shape the light and space. Sometimes, a single setup can yield multiple shots, with a change of lens, a shift in the angle, or a slight adjustment in blocking. So let's look at the different setups for the 4 scenes that we have for this particular advertisement. In this first setup, notice that the wide shot can actually yield the 2 other tighter shots, meaning I only need my camera to go in a little closer to the subject and I'll be able to get the 2 tighter shots from the original wide shot. Meanwhile, for the second setup, I would need to reposition the camera to the spot behind Kevin in order to get that shot of the phone. And that means that putting the camera there, my angle could potentially show some lighting setup that was originally set up for the wider shot. So that would require a bit of a movement or a bit of a rearrangement of the rigging of the camera for my DOP, which is why we have 2 setups for scene number 1. Now let's go to scene number 2. Setup number 3, or the first setup for scene number 2, is the wide shot of the family having lunch. Notice that when I go to setup number 4, I would need to go to the other side of the table to get this shot of Kevin. Setup number 5 is the matching medium close-up of Manuel. And I would have to go to the opposite side of the table in order to get his shot. But I'm still on the other side of that wide shot compared to the previous wide shot that we got. I needed to cross to the other side of the table in order to get the 2 tighter shots. So that's 3 setups for scene number 2. Let's now go to scene number 3. The first setup for scene number 3, setup number 6, are all the shots of the phone. That means that the camera would have been set up behind Kevin. Remember that Kevin was seated on his sofa all throughout scene number 3. So that camera setup would be enough to take all those 4 different camera phone shots. Scene number 7 is the shot that is pointing towards the window. The wide shot was the first wide shot that revealed to us that he is actually in his condo. Notice that I only need to bring the camera closer to him or change the lens into a tighter lens, and I would be able to get the other shot from this setup, which is the shot of the phone and his hand rubbing his other hand as a sign of his nervousness. Scene number 8 is another perspective of the condo. This time, it's pointing towards the dark side of the room. The wide shot is showing a little bit more of his condo, but if you bring the camera closer, I would be able to get the medium close-up and the close-up of Kevin when he received the messages or while he was waiting for the message from Manuel. So I don't need to change my camera setup or my lighting from the wide shot of the sofa to the tighter shot of those two close-ups. So that means setup number 8 would have accounted for these 3 shots. So for scene number 3, 3 setups. Setup number 9 is the only setup for scene number 4. We started with a wide shot of the Silverio living room that showed the foreground of the military photos of Manuel and the action where we had him coming in to pick up his phone when Kevin sent him the message. The tighter shot of Manuel reading his phone was from the same camera angle. So again, you just needed to slap on a tighter lens or bring the camera a little bit closer. Although in this case, basing from the distance of the wide shot to Manuel, where he stood to pick up the phone, I would think that they only put on a tighter lens to get the close-up of Manuel. So that gives you 9 different setups across 4 different scenes. You have one scene, scene number 4, with only one setup, whereas you have 3 setups for scene number 2 and scene number 3. The next time you prepare for a film, streaming content, or AVP, take time to create a visualization of your project. It's more than imagination, it's preparation. So it doesn't just help us imagine the final narrative, it also helps us plan how to build it. Whether through a good old storyboard or any of the many available tools out there, visualization is the bridge between the narrative and the technical, the emotional and the logistical, the story and the shoot. It's where intention meets execution, where meaning becomes method, and where storytelling begins to take form.